The unexpected clash in the sky, ***, the airplane cabin buzzed with the familiar mix of excitement and impatience. The hum of the engines, the shuffling of luggage being pushed into overhead bins, and the low chatter of passengers filled the space. Flight attendants moved swiftly up and down the aisles, guiding travelers, checking seatbelts, and making sure everything was in order before takeoff. Among the crowd was Maya, a woman who, at first glance, appeared completely ordinary. She wasn't dressed in glamorous clothing. Instead, she wore a simple white t-shirt, light blue jeans, and sneakers, comfortable clothes for a long flight. Her hair was tied back in a ponytail, and in her hand, she carried a book that she planned to read once the plane leveled in the sky. But while she looked like an everyday traveler, there was something different about this journey. Today, Maya wasn't seated in economy class like she usually was. This time, she had a first-class ticket, a surprise gift from her husband, who wanted her to experience comfort and luxury on her trip. When Maya stepped into the first class cabin, she felt the eyes of passengers already seated in the plush leather chairs. Some looked curious, others skeptical. A few raised eyebrows, as though silently questioning whether she truly belonged there. Maya noticed, of course, but chose to ignore it. She had a valid ticket. She had every right to be there. With a small smile, she slid into her seat by the window. She placed her book in her lap and exhaled, ready to enjoy the rare luxury of extra legroom and a quieter cabin. For a brief moment, she allowed herself to feel excited. Then came the interruption. From the corner of her eye, Maya noticed a tall, blonde flight attendant walking toward her. The woman's polished uniform fit perfectly. Her hair was styled into a neat bun, and her expression carried an air of authority. Her heels clicked softly against the floor as she stopped directly in front of Maya's seat. Leaning slightly forward, the attendant's sharp eyes scanned Maya from head to toe. Without even glancing at her ticket, she spoke in a firm, almost dismissive voice. Excuse me, ma'am? I think you're in the wrong section. This seat is reserved for first-class passengers only. The words struck Maya like a cold gust of wind. For a second, she wondered if she had heard correctly. She looked up, meeting the attendant's piercing gaze, and felt the weight of judgment behind it. Maya quickly gathered her composure. Holding her boarding pass tightly in her hand, she smiled politely and replied, "This is my seat." She extended the ticket forward, offering it to the attendant as proof. Her voice was calm, but inside, her heart had started to beat faster. The attendant barely glanced at the pass, her lips pressed into a thin line. Instead of apologizing, she narrowed her eyes and shook her head slightly. Ma'am, mistakes happen. This section is not open to economy passengers. Please move to your assigned seat so we can prepare for takeoff. The tone of her voice wasn't just professional. It was laced with disbelief that someone like Maya could ever hold a first-class ticket. Passengers sitting nearby began to notice the exchange. A man in a business suit leaned slightly forward in curiosity. A woman across the aisle raised an eyebrow, whispering something to her companion. Others glanced, then quickly looked away, pretending not to see, though their ears were tuned to every word. Maya felt the heat rising in her cheeks. The stares made her feel exposed, as though she was being put on trial for daring to sit in a seat she had every right to occupy. She pushed the ticket closer toward the attendant. Please, look. It clearly says seat 1A. That's this seat, isn't it? Her voice trembled, just slightly, not out of guilt, but from the humiliation of being accused in front of strangers. But the attendant didn't soften. If anything, her tone grew sharper, more condescending. Ma'am, I don't want to argue with you. We'll have to call security if you don't move. The words cut deeper than Maya expected. Security, for simply sitting in the seat she had purchased. A murmur spread through the cabin. Some passengers smirked as if entertained by the spectacle, while others shifted uncomfortably, clearly uneasy with the confrontation, but unwilling to intervene. Maya sat frozen. Her hands gripped the ticket so tightly the paper crinkled. She had never been treated this way before. She wasn't used to being looked down upon, judged solely by her clothes, her simplicity, her appearance. Inside, a mix of emotions swirled: anger, shame, disbelief. She wanted to stand up and shout, too. Tell everyone she had as much right to be there as anyone else. But another part of her whispered to stay calm, to avoid creating a bigger scene, so she sat there, breathing heavily, fighting back the tears threatening to well in her eyes. The flight attendant, still hovering, crossed her arms and tapped her foot impatiently, waiting for Maya to comply. And that's when something shifted. A shadow appeared in the aisle, and a man in a tailored navy blue suit began walking slowly toward the confrontation. His presence commanded attention immediately. He wasn't just another passenger. His stride was confident, his posture powerful. Passengers turned their heads, the whispers dying down as curiosity took over. Who was he? Why was he heading straight toward them? Maya glanced up and felt her chest tighten. She knew that walk, that calm but commanding expression. It was Adrian, her husband. What no one else on that plane knew, not the passengers, not even the flight attendants, was that Adrian wasn't just Maya's husband. He was also the owner of the airline. And as he approached, Maya realized this confrontation was about to change everything. Humiliation at 30,000 feet, asterisk, asterisk. The tension inside the cabin thickened like a storm cloud. The flight attendant's voice, sharp and unwavering, rose above the usual hum of the airplane. Her finger pointed directly at Maya, not just to correct her, but to accuse her in front of everyone. Asterisk, you need to move to economy class immediately. First class is not for people like you. Asterisk, those last words echoed in the air like a slap. People like you? Maya felt her stomach twist. Her ears burned. Her heart thudded painfully in her chest. What did the woman mean, people like you? Was it her plain white t-shirt? Her simple jeans? The absence of a designer bag or sparkling jewelry? Whatever it was, the flight attendant had made a judgment, loud and clear. The sting wasn't just in the words. It was in the way they were delivered, with the casual cruelty of someone who believed she had the right to decide who belonged and who didn't. Passengers shifted in their seats, their eyes drawn like magnets to the scene unfolding. Some leaned forward, hungry for the drama. A few smirked, whispering behind their hands. Others looked down quickly, avoiding eye contact, unwilling to get involved. But no one spoke up. No one defended Maya. The silence of the crowd cut deeper than the attendant's words. It was as if the entire cabin had silently agreed. Maya didn't look like she belonged in first class. Her hands shook as she held out her ticket again, her voice quieter this time but desperate, almost pleading. Asterisk, please look at this. It clearly says seat 1A. Asterisk, the attendant glanced at it briefly, her lips pressing tighter. But instead of apologizing, or even considering she might be wrong, she dismissed Maya with a shake of her head. Mistakes happen, she said curtly. Asterisk, someone like you doesn't belong here. I'll call security if necessary. The word security asterisk landed like a hammer. Maya's breath caught in her throat. Security, for sitting in her assigned seat. Her chest rose and fell rapidly, and she felt her face flush hot with humiliation. She wasn't a criminal. She wasn't trying to sneak into a place she didn't pay for. And yet, here she was, being treated like an intruder in a place she had every right to be. Her mind screamed to defend herself louder, to stand up for her dignity, but her body froze under the weight of dozens of stares. She sat there stiffly, her ticket crumpling in her trembling hand, as the embarrassment settled over her like a heavy blanket. For Maya, who had always carried herself with quiet confidence, this moment was crushing. She wasn't wealthy or flashy, but she valued kindness and respect above all else. She never imagined she would be publicly judged, humiliated not for what she did, but for how she looked. The minutes dragged on painfully. The flight attendants tapping foot, the smirks of a few passengers, the buzzing whispers all pressed down on her. Maya could feel the tears welling in her eyes, but she blinked hard, refusing to let them fall. She wouldn't give them the satisfaction of seeing her break. Still, inside, she felt small, smaller than she had in years. Then, slowly, a shift in the atmosphere. From the back of the cabin, a figure began to approach. Tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in a perfectly tailored navy blue suit, he moved with a calm authority that turned heads. His stride wasn't hurried, but it carried weight. Like each step demanded attention. The murmurs in the cabin grew quieter as passengers noticed him. Some straightened in their seats, sensing his importance without even knowing who he was. Maya, still sitting frozen, lifted her eyes and recognized him instantly. Her heart clenched not from fear, this time, but from relief. It was Adrian, her husband, to the world. He looked like just another well-dressed businessman. His crisp suit, polished shoes, and calm demeanor fit perfectly into the image of a first-class traveler. But behind that poised exterior was something far more powerful. Adrian wasn't just successful. He wasn't just wealthy. He was the owner of the airline they were sitting in. Yet in this moment, nobody else knew that truth. Not the smirking passengers, not the flight attendant still tapping her foot impatiently. To them, Adrian was simply another man in a suit. But to Maya, he was her anchor. And as he drew closer, his eyes fixed on her, and then on the flight attendant, she realized something. The humiliation she had endured was about to take a dramatic turn, because while Maya carried herself with quiet dignity, Adrian carried something else, authority, and he was about to use it. The silent power of a billionaire ***. Adrian had been sitting just a few rows behind, his sharp eyes watching everything unfold. From the very beginning, he had noticed the way passengers stared at Maya when she entered first class. He noticed the raised brows, the sideways glances, the whispered judgments, and he had chosen to remain quiet. It wasn't because he didn't care, quite the opposite. Adrian adored Maya. She was the center of his world, his wife, his partner, the woman who reminded him every day that love was not built on wealth, status, or appearances, but on kindness and authenticity. But Adrian also knew something deeper. Maya's simplicity was her strength. She had never needed expensive clothes, diamonds, or luxury brands to define her worth. She was confident in who she was, and he loved that about her. That's why, when they boarded, Adrian had quietly chosen not to reveal his identity. He wanted to see, for once, how the world would treat his wife when they didn't know who she was married to. And now, standing only a few feet away, his jaw tightened as he saw the truth revealed. The flight attendant's arrogance, the passengers' silence, and the humiliation painted across Maya's face. His fists clenched at his sides. But he didn't step forward immediately. He forced himself to wait, to observe, because he realized this wasn't just about Maya anymore. This was about something larger, the values of the very airline he owned. For years, Adrian had built his company on a vision that flying should be a dignified, comfortable experience for all passengers, no matter who they were or how they looked. He had poured resources into customer service training, emphasized respect and courtesy in every level of the company. But now, with his own eyes, he was witnessing the opposite. The very people entrusted to uphold his vision were tearing it apart in front of him. The flight attendant stood tall, her voice now sharper, more commanding. Ma'am, if you don't cooperate, we will have to escort you out. Maya flinched, her hand tightening round the crumpled ticket. The tears she was fighting back shimmered in her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. She sat still, holding her ground, though her silence spoke volumes of her pain. The whispers around them grew louder. Passengers craned their necks, some shaking their heads in disbelief, others recording the scene on their phones. A few whispered cruelly, almost enjoying the spectacle. Adrian's blood boiled. This wasn't just an insult to his wife, it was a betrayal of everything he had built. To see passengers treated like intruders simply because they didn't look the part, it was unacceptable. And yet, for a brief moment longer, he stood still. Why? Because in that silence, he was measuring the culture he had created, measuring the integrity of his employees, measuring the very heart of his airline. But the answer had already become painfully clear. His airline was failing not in profits or planes, but in respect. Finally, Adrian drew in a deep breath and stepped forward, his tall frame cutting through the polished navy blue suit he wore seemed to add gravity to his presence. The soft murmur of passengers hushed instantly. There was something about him, an aura of authority, a weight in his stride that demanded attention without him uttering a word. The flight attendant noticed him too. She straightened, adjusting her uniform quickly, suddenly aware of his piercing gaze. But still, she continued in her stubborn tone, gesturing at Maya. Sir, this passenger is refusing to move. She doesn't have the proper seat. We might need to remove her. Adrian stopped, just a few feet away, his expression unreadable. His eyes flicked from the attendant to Maya, then back again. He could see the way Maya's hands shook, the way she sat frozen in place, fighting between dignity and despair. He felt a pang in his chest, but outwardly, he remained calm. Then, in a low but steady voice that carried across the cabin, he said, "That will not be necessary." The air shifted. The authority in his tone silenced the whispers immediately. The passengers leaned back, sensing something bigger was about to happen. The attendant blinked, caught off guard. She stammered, "Sir, this woman is clearly in the wrong section. She doesn't belong here." Adrian's jaw flexed, but he stayed calm. He tilted his head slightly, his voice firm yet controlled. "Doesn't belong here. Are you absolutely sure about that?" Her confidence faltered. She hesitated, but pride pushed her forward. "Yes, sir. We have rules, and she doesn't fit them." The arrogance in her tone was the final straw. Adrian had seen enough. Inside, his fury burned hotter than ever, but his expression remained calm, almost cold. Because Adrian wasn't just a man defending his wife. Now, he was the billionaire owner of the airline, about to teach a lesson not only to the attendant, but to everyone watching. And as Maya looked at him, her tears finally threatening to spill, she realized something. This wasn't just about humiliation anymore. This was about justice, and Adrian was about to deliver it. The big reveal the cabin fell into an almost eerie silence. Every whisper, every rustle of a magazine, even the faint hum of the engines seemed to fade. The moment Adrian's deep commanding voice rang out, "That will not be necessary." The words weren't loud, but they carried a weight that silenced the entire first-class section. Heads turned instantly, eyes locking onto the tall man now standing in the aisle. His posture was calm, but there was a steel-like authority in the way he held himself. The flight attendant, caught off guard, spun around to face him. For a brief second, her polished confidence wavered. Still, she tried to regain control of the situation. Straightening her uniform, she gestured toward Maya with an air of certainty. Sir, she began, her voice a touch defensive. "This woman is refusing to leave first class. She clearly doesn't belong here." Her words hung in the air. A final attempt to justify herself. But Adrian's eyes locked onto hers. Yes, but sharp and unyielding, like a blade. The intensity of his gaze made her swallow nervously, her bravado shrinking under the weight of his silence. Finally, he spoke. His tone was measured, deliberate, and edged with quiet power. Asterisk doesn't belong here. Are you sure about that? Asterisk, the question sliced through her confidence. Around them, passengers leaned forward in their seats, their curiosity now at its peak. Every eye was fixed on the exchange. It wasn't just about a seat anymore. This had turned into something bigger. The attendant crossed her arms tightly across her chest, clinging to her authority. Asterisk, yes, sir. We have rules, and this passenger doesn't fit the profile. Asterisk, her words, meant to assert dominance, only deepened the tension. The implication was clear. Maya's appearance, her simplicity, was enough to disqualify her from belonging in first class. That was the moment Adrian decided to end the charade. Slowly, with a composure that only magnified his authority, he reached into his jacket pocket. The movement alone was enough to hold the attention of the entire cabin. He pulled out a sleek black leather wallet and opened it with deliberate precision. From inside, he withdrew an ID card, simple, yet unmistakable. On it was the bold logo of the airline, alongside a name that carried weight in the business world. Adrian Knight, owner and CEO. Gasps rippled through the cabin. Passengers exchanged wide-eyed glances, their jaws dropping in disbelief. A murmur spread like wildfire, and even those in the rows behind craned their necks to catch a glimpse. The flight attendant's face drained of color. The arrogance that had been etched into her features vanished in an instant, replaced with shock, fear, and a dawning realization of the mistake she had made. Her lips trembled as she stuttered, barely able to form the words. Asterisk, wire. The owner. Asterisk, Adrian gave a single, firm nod. His expression was unreadable, neither anger nor softness, just the calm, unshakable authority of a man who didn't need to raise his voice to command a room. He turned slightly, extending his hand toward Maya. His voice, though steady, carried a weight that left no room for doubt. Asterisk, this woman is not only a first-class passenger, he said, pausing deliberately, letting the weight of his words sink in. She is also my wife, and the way you treated her is unacceptable. Asterisk, the silence that followed was deafening. Passengers who had smirked earlier now lowered their eyes in shame. Those who had recorded the incident on their phones whispered in disbelief, realizing the magnitude of what they had just captured, and Maya, still clutching her ticket, felt her heart swell with a mix of relief and pride. For the first time since the confrontation began, she no longer felt small or out of place. Her husband had spoken, not just as the owner of the airline, but as her protector, her partner, someone who valued her dignity above all else. The flight attendant stood frozen, her arms limp at her sides, her face burned with embarrassment. Just moments earlier, she had wielded her authority with arrogance, but now, standing before the very man who signed her paycheck, she was powerless. Passengers shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Some glanced at Maya with newfound admiration, realizing how wrong their earlier judgments had been. Others simply watched in silence, absorbing the lesson unfolding before their eyes. Adrian didn't raise his voice. He didn't humiliate her in return. Instead, his quiet strength did all the talking. The message was clear. Respect should never be dictated by appearances, and arrogance had no place in his airline. As he stood beside Maya, gently resting a hand on her shoulder, the tension in the cabin eased, but the weight of the moment lingered. Everyone present knew they had just witnessed something extraordinary, and for the flight attendant, whose arrogance had been so exposed, the shame of that moment would linger long after the plane touched down. Because in that cabin, at 30,000 feet, the balance of power had shifted, and the world now knew the truth. Maya wasn't just someone like you. She was the wife of a billionaire who valued her far beyond wealth or appearances. Respect earned. Lesson learned. Adrian didn't raise his voice. He didn't slam his authority onto the table or create a spectacle. That wasn't his way. True power, he believed, was not about shouting the loudest, it was about commanding respect with calmness and fairness. So, instead of prolonging the confrontation, he turned to the captain, who had quietly appeared near the cabin door, alerted by the commotion. Adrian's tone was controlled, but the weight of his words left no room for question. Please make a note of this incident for review. It must be addressed immediately. The captain nodded, his expression solemn. Within moments, the arrogant flight attendant was quietly escorted toward the back of the plane. She walked stiffly, her once confident stride now broken by the heavy shame of her actions. The rest of the crew looked on, wide-eyed and shaken, realizing they had just witnessed something that would be remembered long after this flight. The atmosphere in the first-class cabin shifted. What had been heavy with tension now felt lighter, though the echoes of what had happened lingered. Passengers sat in silence, reflecting, some ashamed of their earlier assumptions, others humbled by the lesson they had just witnessed. Adrian then turned his full attention back to Maya, sliding into the seat beside her. He reached for her hand. His strong fingers wrapped around hers, grounding her in that moment. He leaned closer, his voice soft, tender, so different from the commanding tone he had used just moments earlier. I'm sorry you had to go through that. He whispered, his eyes filled with sincerity. But now, everyone here knows the truth. You don't need luxury or expensive clothes to deserve respect. You never have. Maya's eyes glistened with unshed tears, but this time, they weren't from humiliation. They were from relief, from gratitude, from the overwhelming love she felt for the man sitting beside her. She smiled softly, her lips trembling with emotion. I never wanted special treatment, she murmured. All I wanted was fairness. And in that moment, something remarkable happened. The passengers around them shifted, some leaning forward, their expressions softened. It was as if Maya's words had struck a chord deep inside them, because what she said was true. Fairness, respect, dignity. These were things every person deserved, no matter how they looked, dressed, or lived. And yet, so many of them, very passengers, sitting in their comfortable, first-class seats, had silently judged her based on nothing but appearance. Now, confronted with their own biases, many lowered their eyes, ashamed. Others smiled faintly at Maya, their silent way of apologizing. The rest of the flight passed in peace. No more whispers, no more judgment. Just the quiet hum of the engines as the plane soared through the clouds. But for Maya and Adrian, that flight became something much more than just a journey, became a turning point. When the plane landed hours later, the story didn't stay in the cabin. Several passengers had recorded snippets of the confrontation, and within hours, the videos began to spread online. Headlines appeared on news sites, social media feeds lit up, and the world quickly learned about the simple woman in first class. The reactions were overwhelming. Thousands of people praised Maya for holding her dignity in the face of humiliation. They applauded Adrian not just for revealing his identity, but for the grace and calm authority with which he defended his wife. But, beyond the praise, the story struck a deeper nerve. It sparked conversations around the world about prejudice, about judging others by appearances, and about the importance of treating everyone with respect, regardless of wealth or status. For Adrian's airline, the incident became a wake-up call. Training programs were redesigned. Staff were reminded that kindness and courtesy were not optional, they were essential. New policies were introduced, ensuring that no passenger would ever again be judged unfairly simply for looking ordinary. And, for Maya, she returned home with a powerful reminder, one that would stay with her for the rest of her life. It didn't matter that her husband was a billionaire. It didn't matter that she could, if she wanted, surround herself with all the luxury the world could offer. What mattered was far simpler, far more profound. True worth has nothing to do with wealth or appearance. It has everything to do with how we treat one another. Asterisk asterisk that day, Maya became more than just a passenger in first class. She became a symbol, a reminder to everyone, from the skies above to the world below, that dignity is priceless, and respect should never have conditions. And as the world continued to share her story, Maya held Adrian's hand tightly, knowing that sometimes the simplest people carry the greatest lessons.